For years, dealing with the HOA has been frustrating, but this time they went too far. A letter arrived in the mail. Bold red letters stamped across the top. Notice of HOA violation. I already knew who was behind it. Karen, the HOA president, had made it her personal mission to police every little thing in the neighborhood. This time the issue was excessive vehicle presence. Apparently having a normal number of cars parked in my own driveway was now a violation. The kicker. The fine wasn't just a warning. She raised my HOA fees. Permanently. Now let me be clear, I wasn't running a car dealership. We had 3 vehicles, a work truck for my business, my wife's SUV for her hospital shifts, and our daughter's birthday gift, a used Honda Civic. That was it. But according to Karen, this was an eyesore and negatively impacted the community aesthetic. Never mind that half the board members had multiple cars themselves. This wasn't about cars. This was about control. Karen had always been power-hungry, but lately she'd been getting worse. The HOA had turned into her personal kingdom, and she ruled it with an iron fist. Daily inspections, random fines, petty violations. I'd even caught her taking photos of my driveway at night. She wasn't just enforcing the rules, she was targeting people she didn't like, and now it was personal. At first I thought about fighting it the normal way. An appeal, maybe a meeting with the board. But then I remembered something Karen didn't know. I owned the majority of the neighborhood. For the last 5 years I had been quietly buying up properties, spreading ownership across different LLCs. A few here, a few there, all legal, all under the radar. And as of last week, my lawyer had confirmed it. I now owned 67% of the development. Karen thought she had all the power. She had no idea what was coming. Karen wasn't backing down. If anything, she was doubling her efforts. The emergency HOA meeting was set. It was obvious what she was trying to do. Turn me into an example, a warning for anyone else who dared to challenge her authority. The violations started piling up. 1 notice a day, sometimes 2, and they weren't even trying to sound reasonable anymore. Excessive driveway usage, visual disruption, altering community aesthetics. They were making things up. I even caught Karen standing outside my house one afternoon, clipboard in hand, taking photos again. But this time I noticed something different. She wasn't just taking pictures of the cars. She was writing down timestamps. That's when it clicked. She was tracking our movements. She wanted proof that our vehicles were there too often, that we weren't moving them frequently enough. She was building a case. And if that wasn't bad enough, I later found out she had been circulating complaints from anonymous neighbors. Complaints that just so happened to support her argument. It was all a setup. But Karen wasn't the only one with evidence. I had been preparing for this for years. Every ridiculous fine, every selective enforcement, every abuse of power. I had it all documented. Footage of her sneaking around at 3 a.m. ruler in hand, measuring people's lawns. Photos of her own house, which, by her own rules, should have been fined multiple times over. And most importantly, testimonies from neighbors who had been wronged just like I had. Mrs. Johnson, my sweet 82-year-old neighbor, had been fined for her roses being too vibrant. Too vibrant. Mr. Chen, the high school science teacher, got a violation for his car sticking out an inch over his driveway during a snowstorm. There was a pattern. Karen didn't enforce rules. She enforced control. That's when I knew I wasn't going into this meeting alone. People were fed up. I started making calls, quiet conversations with key neighbors. Those who had been bullied, those who had been unfairly fined, those who had been too scared to fight back. Until now, Karen wanted a showdown. She was about to get one. The meeting room was packed, every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls, arms crossed, waiting to see how this would unfold. Karen sat at the front, smiling like she had already won. She had a laptop hooked up to the projector ready to put on a show, and oh, what a show it was. The lights dimmed, and Karen clicked to the first slide, a blown-up photo of my driveway taken from an angle that made it look like a car dealership. She had even hired a professional photographer. As you can see, she began her voice dripping with fake authority. This level of vehicle congestion is unacceptable. Our community has standards, and we cannot allow one resident to disrupt the harmony of our neighborhood. The board members, her little circle of loyalists, nodded along like puppets. The vote was clearly already decided in their minds. Karen flipped to another slide. Time-stamped photos taken at different times of the day. She had been tracking us just like I thought. She stood there enjoying herself, convinced that she was about to bury me in HOA violations. Then I stood up. Slowly. Deliberately, I adjusted my tie, cleared my throat, and spoke just loud enough for the whole room to hear. Point of order. Madam President Karen's smile twitched. She wasn't expecting that I walked to the front, taking my time, and pulled out a folder full of legal documents. According to HOA bylaw section 73, I said, placing the papers down, property owners have the right to challenge a vote if they hold a controlling interest in the development. Karen frowned, clearly confused. I now own 67% of this neighborhood. I let the words sink in, which means I am the HOA. Karen's face went pale. The room was dead silent. I turned to the board. Effective immediately, I'm calling for a full review of HOA leadership, finances, and rule enforcement. That includes all past violations, including those you've chosen to ignore. Karen shot up from her seat. You can't do that. This isn't allowed. I smiled. Actually, it is. And then I pulled out my final piece of evidence. A slideshow of my own. Only mine wasn't a collection of manipulated photos. It was a list of all the rules Karen had ignored for her friends. A breakdown of mysterious missing HOA funds. And most damning of all, receipts showing HOA money had been used for a brand new backyard renovation. At Karen's house. The room erupted. People started shouting, listing their own stories of unfair fines and double standards. She fined me for my trash cans being out an hour late. But her best friend parks on the street every night. I got a notice for my shutters, but look at hers. They're falling apart. Where did all our HOA fees go? Karen tried to regain control, but it was over. Then a voice from the back cut through the chaos. I moved to dissolve the board. A beat of silence. Then, cheers. Karen wasn't the type to go down quietly. Even after the meeting where her empire crumbled, she still thought she could fight her way out within days. I got a notice. She was suing me. Her claim that I had fraudulently acquired my properties in the neighborhood and had used deceptive tactics to take over the HOA. In her mind, I was the villain. She painted a dramatic picture of me as some power-hungry developer trying to destroy the community. And of course, she didn't stop there. She called the news. One afternoon, I looked outside and saw a local news van parked near my house. Karen stood in front of it, giving some over-the-top speech about saving the neighborhood. She even had a few of her remaining followers standing behind her, nodding along. I ignored it. Let her talk. I had something much better. Proof. When we got to court, Karen walked in with that same smug expression she always had at HOA meetings. She truly believed this lawsuit would scare me into backing down. But then my lawyer got up and started laying out the facts. First, we played HOA meeting footage, where Karen bragged about her strict rule enforcement, openly admitting that she targeted certain homeowners while letting others slide. Then came the financial records. Thousands of dollars in HOA fees had simply vanished under her leadership. Money that was supposed to go toward community upkeep had instead gone to, well, no one could explain. And then the final blow, emails and text messages. We had uncovered messages between Karen and her inner circle, proving that she had been manipulating HOA rules for her personal gain. At that point, the judge leaned forward. Let's talk about these missing funds. Karen's face drained of color. She shifted in her seat, mumbling excuses, but the damage was done. She lost. The ruling was brutal. She was ordered to repay every unjust fine she had imposed on homeowners, and that wasn't even the worst part. A criminal investigation was opened into the missing HOA funds. That same day, Karen resigned in disgrace. She sent out a whiny farewell email blaming vindictive residents and claiming she had only ever tried to protect the community. No one cared. By the end of it all, Karen was gone. The HOA was restructured, and the neighborhood finally got the peace it deserved. With Karen out of the picture, the neighborhood finally had a chance to fix the mess she left behind. The first step: electing a new HOA board. But this time, instead of power-hungry control freaks, it was made up of actual residents, people who genuinely cared about the community instead of using it as their personal kingdom. One of the first things we did was rewrite the HOA rules. No more vague nonsense like visual disruption or excessive driveway usage. Petty fines were gone. Instead, we focused on things that actually mattered: keeping the sidewalks safe, maintaining common areas, and organizing community events that people actually enjoyed. With Karen's stranglehold gone, something amazing happened. Property values went up. Turns out people prefer living in a neighborhood where they don't have to worry about getting fined for parking in their own driveway. And Karen, she moved away, probably hoping for a fresh start where no one knew her name. But here's the best part. Her new neighborhood. It had an HOA, a brutal one. Stricter rules. Harsher fines, even crazier board members than she ever was. It didn't take long before she was on the other side, getting fined for her grass being too long and her trash cans being out too early. Poetic justice. Then one day, I got a call from a random number. It was from someone in Karen's new neighborhood. "Hey, we heard you took down an HOA president. We might need some advice." Moral of the story: HOAs are meant to serve their communities, not rule them, and sometimes the best revenge is simply taking back what's yours.